Okay, welcome to the biological explanations of aggression. It's very different. It's complicated is the wrong word, but there are some new terms that you may not have come across with regards to the kind of genes and things that you need to know. There's quite a few bits of evidence. Try and get everything down, try and understand it all, and then when we're planning and looking at how to use these things, you can, if you really think you've got too much evidence, you can scratch some of it if you didn't understand it, or whatever it may be. But biological explanations of aggression, what it comes from the spec is genetic factors in aggressive behaviour, including the MAOA gene, and we're going to learn a bit about where that is, what that is, and the effect it's had. So make a note of that, and let's get cracking. Okay, a lot of the use is going to be about twin studies. Why they use these will become more apparent, but one of your AO1s is going to be basically titled twin studies, and I'll take you through that now. So several studies have found a hereditary link. Okay, it accounts for 50% variance. If you don't understand the idea of variance yet, just jot that down, and we'll come back to it. What it's saying here is that when we look at twins, if one twin is aggressive, then the other twin should be aggressive and vice versa. And what we're saying is a lot of studies have found 50%. So it's not super. 100% would be better for proving the biological explanation, but 50% is still pretty high. Okay, two terms here you're going to need to know the difference: monozygotic and dizygotic. The way in which I remember these things are monobrow, monorail, monocycle, monopoly. That's all one, yeah, so one eyebrow, for instance. So that's one egg that gets fertilized and then it splits into twins. So they're identical. Monozygotic are identical twins, and dizygotic are two eggs in the womb that both get fertilized. So they're very, very similar, but it is a separate egg, two separate eggs, and two separate sperms. They come from the same parents, but they're not identical. So monozygotic, one egg, identical; dizygotic, two eggs, non-identical. Okay, so if you're a biological psychologist and you're looking at aggression, I've maybe already touched this already, but what would their hypothesis be regarding monozygotic and dizygotic? Which ones would be more likely to have a link, okay, and which ones wouldn't? Concordance rates is a term that you're going to hear. Concordance, if something concords with something, it's the same. So if there's a high concordance rate, it's saying that if one is aggressive, the other is aggressive. All right, and we're going to look at a few of the findings here. Okay, so there's your straight off comparing the two types of twins for assault. So if one twin has been gone to jail, let's say, or been arrested for assault, then in monozygotic, so in one eggs, identical twins, there's a 50% concordance rate, which means that out of 50 cases, let's say it's all about 100 cases here, it's not, but if it's 100 cases where 100 twins have all been done for assault, in 50 of those cases their twin will have also been done for assault. So it's quite a strong finding. 50% is quite a strong finding in psychology. And dizygotic, and maybe this shows the link, so when they're two separate eggs, so there are some genetic differences, right? Still lots of similarities, but lots more differences. It's 19%. Hopefully that makes sense. Verbal aggression, we've got, I don't know why it's going to change. Monozygotic 28% and dizygotic the percent that it says there, right, for verbal aggression. And there it is. Get all that down. Hopefully you understand it. It's just basically proving that if you were to compare monozygotic with dizygotic with regards to assault and verbal aggression, the concordance rates, the likelihood, so the amount of times that the monozygotic twin is the same as each other, so they both committed assault, is 50% and 19% for dizygotic, and 28% and smaller for the verbal aggression for dizygotic. Okay, another one of your AO1s is going to be adoption studies, and it might jump to mind straight away why they would choose these. Okay, so we're in this, you know, but what would it prove if they were the same as biological? So if a child has been adopted at a young age, okay, and they're given to a new family, and that, let's say that child grows up to be aggressive and they assault someone, okay, if they their adopted parents have never committed assault, okay, they've never been in trouble with the law, but then you were to trace it back and find that actually their biological parents, who they may or may not know, had been committed for assault, then what would that prove? And hopefully you understand that that would prove that there is a biological link or something going on, because you've taken the person out of their the environment with that biological person, yet there seems to be some concordance with it. And I've touched on it there, the idea of if you're the same as the adopted, so let's say the biological parents are not aggressive and haven't been committed for assault or any other aggressive act, so the biologicals haven't, but your adopted parents have, and you are the same as that, then it would be argued that it's a behavioural and it's got nothing to do with biological, it's got to do with the environment around you. So that's why they look at adoption studies, and quite a large amount of them do, and look at huge amounts of adopted kids and try and find out how much of their personality traits and what they do are the same as their biologicals, who they may have had no contact with. It's very interesting. Okay, Rhea Waldrum 2002, so this is your first AO1, just within this kind of idea of adoption studies. Meta-analysis of adoption studies said that genetics accounted for 41% of the variance. Okay, this is close to the 50% in twin studies. So again, finding a lot of evidence for the biological explanation of aggression, and that's what we're looking at here. So at this point, we're saying that, well, there seems to be quite a large amount of evidence to prove that if your genetic parents are aggressive, then you are far more likely to be aggressive. Okay. So here, just to run through one of the differences they found. On the left is the normal male setup, and on the right is where they found a slight difference. Right, and you'll see that the X is slightly different, and you'll see that there's also two Y's. So they sometimes get X, Y, Y is called. And we're just going to look very quickly at what they found with people with this variance, this genetic variance. Okay, XYY, super male syndrome. Affected individuals are usually very tall and thin. Okay, additional symptoms may include antisocial behaviour problems and learning disabilities. Intelligence is usually normal, although IQ on average is 10 to 15 points lower than siblings. What this is basically saying is that they have found a genetic link, okay, a genetic difference, this XYY, this double Y, and that leads to problems, of which some are antisocial or behavioural problems. So that could lead to aggression. There's lots of other things with it, but you know, again, jumping back to the question, how much does how much can the biological explanation explain aggression? In this instance, they would say, yeah, quite a lot, because they found it. However, are they more aggressive? Okay, and Thielgaard, 1984, examined the personality traits of a sample of XYY men and compared them with normal XY men. Focusing on levels of aggression between the two groups, the research concluded that in all occurrences of XYY, 1 in every 1,000, the only factor that seemed to be linked is their height. Levels of aggressiveness fluctuated, so no definitive conclusion could be drawn. So what that's saying there is, although they found this genetic difference, it could not allow and could not predict aggressiveness in men. So although it exists, and there it is, it's not far enough. Thielgaard would argue that you can't use it as a predictor, therefore it doesn't exist. Okay, can a gene influence the level of aggression? Genes can affect testosterone level. Genes can affect how quickly testosterone circulate around the body. Genes can affect the number of testosterone receptors and the sensitivity to those receptors. The warrior gene, which we're going to look at now. So you just need to understand that genes do affect things. They definitely do. We know that. They affect everything. Okay, and they affect testosterone level. And if you don't know, you will know that testosterone is hugely linked to aggression. You know, there's a reasonably strong correlation to say that the more testosterone you have, the more aggressive you are. So if genes affect testosterone and affect aggressiveness, therefore genes, the biological explanation, can affect aggression. All of these things that it's arguing here, a lot of it are during pregnancy. So during a time when a child is developing genitals and things like that, the genes and everything can affect how they grow. Also, obviously, the wheels are set in motion then for puberty. Okay, your body suddenly doesn't decide at like 12, 13, oh, I'm going to be this level of female or male, or this level of aggression. It's set in the genes already. Right, so we're going to look at this warrior gene now. MAOA. So this is the start of one of the ones you really need to know. Let me just click through these and I'll explain it. A lot of work, a lot of writing here, but I just wanted to show how it's different. So don't write all this down, please. All right, just take enough to be able to write one paragraph about what it is. Okay, so maybe 10 words from this, nothing too massive. Things that you need to understand. Here's an MRI, okay, which is a scan basically of looking at differences, and they'll do various things. They could get different parts of the brain to light up through making them aggressive or adding a certain chemical to show where the aggression is. And what they found here, structural the left and functional right MRI scan data shows that subjects with the violence related version of MAOA gene, MAOAL, had reduced volume and activity in the anterior cruciate cortex. Do you need to know any of that? No, you just need to know that there is a difference in the brain, in the cortex probably is a good word to get, when you have this MAOA or warrior gene. Had reduced volume and activity in the anterior cruciate cortex, blue area in the front of the brain at left, and corresponding yellow area in right. Okay, so you've got the two different things that are happening there, and it's just showing you, which is thought to be the hub, the circuit responsible for regulating impulsive aggression. Colour-coded areas show where subjects with the L gene differed from subjects with the H gene type. So it's just saying they found a difference in the brain, in the cortex, from people that had this MAOA and didn't. And that's all you need to know. It's a visual way of remembering it, maybe. The next is the link to serotonin. Now, serotonin may be, I hope, something, a word you understand, and it's linked to aggression as we go through. So coenzymes MAOA, which break down key mood regulating chemical messages, most notably serotonin. This in turn influences how the brain gets wired during development. The variations may have more impact on males because they have only one copy of this X chromosome, while females have two copies, of which the H variant is in most cases. It's just to say that it is linked to MRA. So there is way too much writing here. So what you need to get is MRIs have shown a difference in activity in the cortex, okay, and that is linked to serotonin. And we know that serotonin has an effect on our mood and the way in which we behave. Sorry for all the writing. Okay, a few more AO1. Several previous studies have linked increased serotonin during development with violence with the L version of MRA. For example, your first study, AO1, right, there's a few in AO3 as well, but Caspi et al. 2002 discovered that the gene's effects depend on interactions with environmental factors. Men with the difference, the MRA difference, were more prone to impulsive behaviour, but only if they were abused as children. So this is where we start to get into this idea that there can't be 100% concordance between having this gene and being aggressive, that there are other interactions that happen. So that's just your first kind of bit into that. Yes, that's just showing it in a visual sense for you, the gene plus something. Okay, and in that sense, unfortunately, it's child abuse will lead to highly aggressive people. Okay, hopefully you understand that. the AO1 before we move to this. If you don't, you can go back. But do you understand the gene? Do you understand the arguments? Do you understand what twin studies might show and what adoption studies might show? If you've got those four, then that's probably your AO1 paragraphs. All right. Like I say, in lesson we'll see what we like and what was important. But AO3. We've got this one already, but it's important to get in your AO3 as well. On its own, the MAOA gene variant has no effect, but if males who carry the gene were abused as children, this greatly increases the chance of them committing a violent crime. Therefore, in your paragraph, you'd be saying something like that. This does not prove that the biological explanation can 100% explain aggression. There has to be some behavioural, environmental influences. It seems that aggressiveness is influenced by a variation in the MAOA gene, which is sensitive to social experiences early in development. Therefore, its functional outcome depends on social context. We've discussed that. This indicates an interaction of genetics and environment is at work when determining human aggression. Okay, this is an interesting study. We may look in a bit more detail at this, or you can go and find it now. But Bruner et al. Studied a large Dutch family where all the males had a mutant form of the MAOA gene. All had borderline retardation and reacted aggressively when angry, fearful or frustrated. Okay, remind me to look this up on Wikipedia if you have or you don't in the lesson, because it will bring it a bit more to life. It's not the greatest thing to see, but some of the things that the males were doing in this family, and you're talking generation after generation after generation, all committing very similar aggressive acts, does suggest that there is this abnormal MAOA activity associated with aggression. They all had it, only the males, it was all running down the male side, and they all did these very highly aggressive acts. Okay. Again, don't take too much of this. You want to get enough so that you can write a small paragraph. Moffat et al. 1992 performed a longitudinal study, so you definitely want that, on 442 New Zealand males from birth to age 26. So this seems like a good study so far. Recording which participants as children suffered abuse, and also what level of activity the MAOA gene participants had. It was found that those who suffered abuse and had the low activity version of the gene were 9 times more likely to indulge in antisocial behaviour, including aggression. Participants who had been abused but carried the high activity version of the gene were no more likely to be antisocial than those not suffering abuse, suggesting that the MAOA gene is involved in aggressive behaviour but is sensitive to social experiences early in development, and we've already spoken about this. So it's that idea of the low activity, the L, low activity, and mixed with abuse as a child is going to lead to somebody being very aggressive. Okay, so on to some of the easier bits now, and these will form, I think the next 4 slides are your main kind of evaluation points. So first one, animal studies. Case et al. 1995 study mice genetically engineered to lack MAOA. So in a lab, they've deliberately reduced the MAOA. Okay, they've messed around with the mice genetically to see what happened, basically, and to, as they do with animal studies, they can do these things ethically, or they were allowed to ethically. I'm sure lots of it still goes on. To find things out. The mice had dramatically altered serotonin metabolism and severe behavioural alterations when adult. They showed enhanced aggression and were aggressive during mating, giving support to human studies suggesting that aggression is a direct result of MAOA deficiency rather than genetic influences or psychosocial factors. So, animal study, Case et al. Strong link, genetically modified mice, increase in aggression. The other one, Book and Good, found that male mice reared alone show a stronger tendency to attack other male mice than those reared with others. Other male mice reared with their parents had been shown that when it was necessary to be aggressive and when it was not, giving support to the idea of aggression as a natural biological tendency, shaped by our learning experiences. So case study is fairly simple, makes sense. Animal studies found evidence for. This one is showing that it's that interaction again, that aggression exists, and aggression is there in our genetic makeup, but we actually learn when to be aggressive via our parents and peers and things like that. Right, so that's what that's showing. That there is a biological tendency, but it's shaped by our learning experiences. Okay, some evaluations straight away when you talk about animal studies. Okay, extrapolation. The results of studies of animals cannot be extrapolated to humans because they are physically and cognitively different. However, for ethical reasons, we could not carry out such studies on humans. Breeding aggressive animals can also raise ethical issues. Now, with this, if we haven't already, me, Mr. Prendergast, you are going to try and create this perfect paragraph for you about extrapolation. So make the key notes. Remind me in class, if we haven't, that we want to try and write this perfect paragraph, so then you can remember it, and every time there's an animal study you can regurgitate this perfect evaluation. The explanation is reductionist. Okay, again, you will all not know this. It'll be very easy. You might even just write reductionist now because you know the reductionist paragraph so well that it just that is all you need. But the explanation does not take into account the role of psychological factors such as, and here you can give lots of things, but unconscious conflicts, which is Freud, in early childhood. Right? You could give some cognitive theories. You could give some behavioural parts in there. But in this case, we've just put unconscious conflicts in early childhood. It does not take into account that aggressive behaviour can be learned through imitation, social learning theory. So that's another example for you. It does not take into account the role of anonymity and individuation, which Zimbardo argues plays an important role. So these are all the things that it doesn't take into account. So remember, with reductionists, we're talking about here's all of the reasons, here's 50 reasons that you could be aggressive, and you've reduced it down to, you know, a small part of it, you know, however big that is, you've reduced it down so it's only the biological factors that you're explaining. So what we're saying here is it has to be everything. It's got to take into account other things. It can't be a reductionist explanation. It does not account for situational factors and tends to produce aggressive behaviour, dispositional factors. Okay, this is an interesting one. Here he is. Waldrop shot his wife's friend Leslie Bradshaw 8 times, killing her before attempting to kill his wife by chopping her up with a machete. There he is. Guilty, not guilty, how many years, you know, all of these things in court. Was he responsible? Did his warrior gene? So it's proven that he had the warrior gene. He had the existence of this gene, and also that you know, he was had child abuse. He was abused as a child even. Okay, so does that make you suddenly look at him differently? Okay, in 2009, criminal trial in the United States in the case of Bradley Waldrop, an argument based on a combination of warrior gene and history of child abuse was successfully used to avoid first-degree murder, okay, and the death penalty. So this man didn't get put to death like he maybe other people may have in that state, but he was convicted of murder. So how do you feel about that? Do you feel now that with looking at the gene and knowing its link or not link, and how much do you support it, do you agree or disagree with this? Should we look at everyone's genetic kind of makeup to decide, you know, how guilty they are of something? Right? How much testosterone do they have? How guilty are they? And another one of your AO3s is going to be this. Okay, the way they measure aggression is different. So in some of these you would have seen self-reports, in others it would have been observation. You know, how just simply, you know, how many times have they gone to prison? Have they got done for assault? Have they not? All of these things are very different ways of explaining aggression. Parents and peers, asking a parent or a friend or whatever, or a teacher to say how aggressive is this person. All of those, and if you think about validity, you know, we have to make sure we're measuring what we're measuring. And if one set of studies does self-reports, another does observation, another takes parents and peers, and they all come to the same conclusions or different conclusions, it's very easy for somebody to come in and go, well, none of this is valid because you're not using. If you're going to use self-reports, everyone should use self-reports. If you're going to use observation, everyone should use self-observation. So